Associate Professor in the Division of Social Science at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. I'm a social scientist. I don't have an engineering or a science background, and I'm interested in the issues of science and technology as they impact society. What is the impact on society? So today I've chosen to talk a little bit about technology. I won't talk so much about science. I'll talk a little bit about science as it relates to technology. I'll talk a little bit about the history of technology. And also, how should we understand, what is the best way to understand technology in our personal lives, as Alper mentioned. So first thing I want to mention, usually when I'm teaching in my class at university, I will ask the students, give me an example of technology, and they will say a clicker, a MacBook, or a projector, or an iPhone. They will give me usually these kind of examples of technologies, and those are all great examples. An aeroplane, a warship, these are all fine examples. But the first thing, there are 2 points that I want to make in relation to technology. First point is that technology doesn't necessarily have to be high-tech. Sure, the projector, the computer, the microphone, these clickers, wireless clickers are examples of technology, but we have had technology for many, 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 many years. Technology is not new. And technology doesn't have to be high-tech, like these computers and these cameras and projector screens. Technology can be low-tech. And what we consider to be low-tech today was at one time very high-tech. If you go back 5,000 years into Egyptian culture, when they made pyramids, how did they make the pyramids 5,000 years ago? At that time, they used very advanced technology. We might consider 5,000-year-old technology to be outdated and old and low-tech, but that is our perspective today. At the time when it was used, that technology was high-tech, just as these MacBooks are high-tech today, iPhones are high-tech today. So the first point I want to make is that humans have been using technology for a very, very long time, since antiquity, for thousands and thousands of years. Now, the technologies that we use are very high-tech, but that is not to say that technologies have not been used in the past. Technologies have been used in the past by humans for a very, very long time, especially in farming. The second point that I want to make is that some animals use technology too. Some animals use technology. We tend to think of ourselves as being superior to animals, and in many ways we are superior to animals. But some animals, including monkeys, birds, baboons, they also use technology. So technology is not the prerogative of human beings alone. Some animals use technology. It's just important to remember that. We don't have a monopoly over the usage of technology. Some animals use technology very effectively. I have a video to show, but we have a small group, so I don't want to spend the time showing the video. If you're interested at the end, I can show the video. So, like I said, nowadays, those are the 2 points I want to make. The first, technology was used by human beings very long time ago. The second point is that even some animals use technology. Today, technology, like I said, is associated with high technology, iPhones, iPods, players, and so forth. And we also nowadays talk a lot about innovation. What do we mean by the innovation? What do we mean by the word innovation? We mean the commercialization or the widespread use of a technology. So, for example, if Apple is able to sell its computers a lot, and of course, as we know, Apple is able to sell many computers, many iPads, many iPhones, and so forth, that is an innovation. However, an innovation does not have to be the commercialization. Sometimes, for example, I'm a teacher, and if I have a good way of teaching my students, and some other teachers copy my way of teaching the students, I'm not selling anything. But if 10 teachers copy my method of teaching students, that is also an innovation. It's a new way of teaching, and if some other people copy it, then that can be considered to be innovation, which is why I say it's commercialization or the widespread use of technology. This word technology, you might be surprised to know, is this word has been in the English vocabulary for a long time. It refers to the study of arts or techniques. It has Greek origins. As a word, it was seldom used before 1880. So about 150 years ago, it was seldom used, this word technology. It came into common vocabulary with the Industrial Revolution in England, which, as we commonly say, took place between around 1750 to 1850. And I want to talk a little bit about the Industrial Revolution. I want to talk a little bit about the Industrial Revolution because it's important for the history of technology. Now, before I talk about the Industrial Revolution, I want to make clear that the Industrial Revolution is only one period in history, from 1760 to 1850. it is not the most important period in history. There are many, many other episodes in history, like Islamic history or Chinese history, that are very important. But for technology, for this idea of technology, the Industrial Revolution was very important, and I'll show you why. The Industrial Revolution. What does Industrial Revolution mean? When you talk about revolution, it's a term used to characterize revolutionary changes. Industrial Revolution can take place at different times and in different places. So for example, in China, its latest Industrial Revolution began in 1979. China had earlier Industrial Revolutions as well. Around the time, just before the Industrial Revolution of 1760, in the 1400s and 1500s, Europe was in a very bad state. They were suffering from plague, they were suffering from war, very bad situation in Europe. And in the 1400s and 1500s, China was a major superpower. So at that time, China was up and Europe was down, but with the Industrial Revolution in 1760 to 1850, Europe became up and China seemed to lag behind. But lately, as we all know, since 1979, China has started to revolutionize very fast. It doesn't matter what you consider the time period. Some historians say it is this time, some people say it's this time. For me, I just simply try to remember it as a 100-year period. But it's more important to recognize that it was a process. It took place over a period of time. It's not something overnight. On the 1st of January 1760, you opened the door and everything was changed. It took place over time. That's the most important thing. And the effects of the Industrial Revolution needed time before they could be seen throughout society. As we all know, it occurred in England first. And it's important to remember that England is a very small country. Let's not forget this. Tiny, tiny island, but it had a large impact throughout the world. My parents were born in India. And as we know, that the British, they controlled much of South Asia, they controlled even Hong Kong, much of Africa, and so forth. And it changed the way of living. The Industrial Revolution took people away from agriculture to working in factories and cities, similar to what's happening in China since the 1980s. People are leaving the agricultural and rural areas to work in the cities. When we talk about the Industrial Revolution, we have to remember that it was confined to the cotton, iron, and steel industries. In these three technologies of cotton, iron, and steel, there were big changes. But it was incomplete because it was only these three areas that experienced significant change. So it occurred in certain industries only. But these changes in the cotton, iron, and steel industries drove changes in other industries. And it took 70 years, or depending on how you calculate the time period, some people say 70, some people say even 80, some people say 100. So it wasn't fast, it wasn't rapid. It was neither rapid nor extensive. By extensive, I mean it was confined to three areas, cotton, iron, and steel, and it took at least 70 years. So why do we consider the Industrial Revolution a revolution? The main reason why we consider the Industrial Revolution a revolution was because of the impact technology had. New technologies in the cotton, iron, and steel industries had a large impact throughout society. And what happened was that as people moved from agriculture to working in factories and living in cities, we saw that the worker's relationship to his or her work shifted. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, people used to work in villages, in their homes, in rural areas. After the Industrial Revolution, people left their villages and rural areas to work in factories in the cities. So the main thing I want to highlight about the Industrial Revolution was that this was a period in time, and this is why it's important for technology. It was a period in time where people realized that they need not be subservient to technology, to nature. Before the Industrial Revolution, many people were subservient. They felt they were beneath nature. If nature was good, the harvest was good, crops were good, we had enough to eat one year. If nature was bad, if there was too much rain or bad weather or earthquakes or tsunamis or whatever, and then people didn't have enough to eat. So prior to the Industrial Revolution, human beings felt as if they were secondary to nature. Industrial Revolution was important because it highlighted humans' ability to use and master nature. They could now use technologies, they could exploit natural resources like coal to make the steam engine, the technology of a steam engine, to generate power. And then they felt that this was a period of time where human beings started to change their way of thinking. They felt that we don't have to be subservient to nature. We don't have to be secondary to nature. now we can master nature. We can use technologies such as a steam engine, such as other technologies to control nature. And this, I want to show, is the main reason why the Industrial Revolution had a large impact on human beings in terms of technology. This was a period of time when human beings started to exploit technologies much more. In the past, there was a strong sense that people were secondary to nature. During the Industrial Revolution, humans realized they had the power to master nature. They could use technology to master nature. And now, maybe you are aware, in places like America and even in Hong Kong, in many industrialized places, we feel that we can master nature. What is nature? What is a storm? We can predict the storm coming, we can take care of the storm, we don't have to worry about earthquakes, we can make buildings that are earthquake-proof. We can overcome nature. And that is why the Industrial Revolution was important, because that was a period in time where this change in thinking started to emerge over these 70 years. And that change in thinking has continued from 1850 up until the present day, and it has accelerated. So we feel that anytime we have any problem, we can use technology to solve our problems. We have a problem, find a new technology to solve a problem. We always feel that we are in control and we can create the technologies to solve human society's problems. And this was a shift in thinking in relation to technology that started during the Industrial Revolution. And that's why the Industrial Revolution was important. I'm not saying that, I'm not saying other episodes in history were not important. There were many, many episodes in history which are very, very important. Wars and periods of civilizations flourishing. But the Industrial Revolution was important for technology because this was a period in time where people felt they were no longer secondary to nature, they were in control, they were masters of nature. If we were to take a snapshot, a picture of British society before the Industrial Revolution and a picture of British society after the Industrial Revolution, we would see these contrasts or changes. Before the Industrial Revolution, society was predominantly rural. People lived in the villages, in rural areas. After the Industrial Revolution, more and more people moved to the cities. Before the Industrial Revolution, there was mercantile capitalism where people traded on an individual basis for small items, small volume of products. After the Industrial Revolution, there was industrial capitalism where goods were shipped on ships through canals for trading. Before the Industrial Revolution, growth was driven by trading. I give you something, I give you clothes, you give me some handicrafts for my home, and that is how we achieved growth. After the Industrial Revolution, growth was based on innovation, coming up with new ideas, new technologies. Before the Industrial Revolution, there was sporadic economic growth, so sometimes we would have growth, sometimes we would have recession, and very uneven. After the Industrial Revolution, we had sustained economic growth. And now, like you see, even in 2008, when we had the global financial crisis, people became very worried. We are not accustomed to having recessions now. We don't accept it. We feel we are masters of nature. We feel we are masters of the economy. We should be able to control whether we are in a recession or we are in growth period. We don't accept it. Maybe sometimes it's good to get sick, even for healthy people. Once in a while, it's good to have a fever for many reasons. First, you appreciate your good health. Second, you don't. Your immune system becomes healthier. But now, as an economy, if we get sick, we say, why are we sick? We can't allow us to get sick. We have to cure ourselves and never get sick in the future. This is the mentality now that human beings have. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, there was handicraft production. People made things with their hands. After the Industrial Revolution, people made things in factories. Before the Industrial Revolution, the main source of power was animals, cows, horses, and so forth, humans. After the Industrial Revolution, steam engine became the main sources of power. So what makes the Industrial Revolution a revolution? Like I've said, the Industrial Revolution took place over a 70, 80, maybe 100-year period. So it was evolutionary rather than revolutionary. A revolution, if you look in the dictionary, means quick and sudden overthrow. So it wasn't quick and sudden. It took 70 or 80 years. And like I said, in these three industries, iron, cotton, and steel industries, they were revolutionary change, but not in the rest of society. So why do we call it a revolution? The main reason, in my opinion, we call it a revolution was a social change, the change in mindset. That now we can use technology. We have at our disposal machinery that we can use to control nature. That was the main change. It was this change in thinking that started during this period, which is why I talk about this period, And this is a change in thinking that has continued up until this very day, 2013, and it has accelerated in pace. We feel we can make faster, better, newer, quicker, more ingenious technologies all the time to control nature. And that's why I talk about the Industrial Revolution. This was a shift. It was a social change that occurred during the 1750 to 1850 year period. Social changes changed the way people lived and led their lives. They changed the way people thought. And this is, I think, the most important change of the Industrial Revolution. Changing the way people think is really a big change. If you have children or you have brothers or sisters, sometimes you can remember when you were young, your parents might tell you, study hard, study hard, study hard. But if you don't believe it in your mind, you won't study hard. But however, if you believe that studying hard is important, even if your parents don't say so, you will study hard. So the changes in the mind are very, very important, very significant. And this is a change that occurred in people's mind during the Industrial Revolution that has impacted technological development up to this day. So these social changes in people's mind, thinking that they no longer had to be secondary to nature, they could control nature, then led to economic changes, then led to further technological changes and also political changes. Okay, so that's history. Now I want to talk a little bit about technology and science. Not much, just a little bit. Technological knowledge. Technological knowledge is usually downplayed as compared to scientific knowledge. So if some of you who are in universities, or some of you may have had experience, I had experience. I had one Turkish friend and one Kenyan friend when I was doing my PhD at Cornell. My Turkish friend was in applied physics, doing a PhD in applied physics. My Kenyan friend was doing also a PhD in physics, but theoretical physics. And the Kenyan friend would also always say to the Turkish friend, oh, you are doing applied, you are conducting experiments. I am doing the theory, so I am of a higher status than you. I'm a higher class than you. So technological knowledge is usually downplayed as compared to scientific knowledge. Another example that I can give you to illustrate this point is that even in Hong Kong, especially when I was younger, I was born in Hong Kong, I was raised in Hong Kong, and when I used to travel around Hong Kong in the buses and NTR, I often used to see men, not women, with one long fingernail on their last finger. Only one. And I was always curious, why do they have one longer fingernail? Women, of course, they have longer fingernails everywhere. But then I started to think about why do they, I never asked them, I was too embarrassed to ask them, but I asked many other people, many friends, and the best explanation I can find is as follows. The reason why men have one long fingernail, either on their small finger or their thumb, is to show society that they are not working with their hands. They are not construction workers, they are not cleaning dishes, they're not cleaning the floor. Because if you're a construction worker or you're cleaning the floor, your nail would break. This is to symbolize to society that I am working with my mind. I'm not working with my hands. I'm not making something. My hands, I'm working at a computer. I sit at the desk, I'm a secretary or a manager or something, and I work with my mind. And this is the same idea, that working with the hands is considered to be inferior as compared to working with the mind. So anyone who works with the hands, anyone who works with the minds, think that people who work with the hands are inferior. Okay, and this is how technological knowledge and scientific knowledge are related to one another. Technological knowledge is usually downplayed, is considered to be less important as compared to scientific knowledge. However, technological knowledge has its own tradition. When I talk to my two friends in physics department, both doing PhDs, the theoretical physicist would say to the applied physicist, you are using my knowledge. I'm the one creating the theory and you're just conducting experiments. However, technological knowledge has its own tradition. Not all technologies have a scientific foundation. Science does not have a monopoly over technical knowledge. So, for example, the first airplane was built by the Wright brothers without any science. They had a garage, they were making motorcycles in the garage, and they had this passion to make an airplane. And they started to tinker and they started to experiment. They created different types of planes. Many of them didn't fly. But finally, they created a plane that flew. And that illustrates, without any laws of physics, without any laws of aerodynamics, many of these laws were created after the first airplane was created. This illustrates that science does not have a monopoly over technical knowledge. Gunpowder is another example. of a technology that was made without any scientific foundation. However, nevertheless, scientific knowledge is usually overestimated and technological knowledge is usually underestimated. So the relationship between science and technology is one where technology is considered to be inferior, science is considered to be superior as compared to one another.